Okay, so this is the third video of this discussion. Uh, we were talking about maintaining a stable internal environment and specifically talking about homeostatic control mechanisms and the idea of feedback. Um, so we said that if the feedback or if uh, the response on the part of the body acts to actually increase the change or make it worse, or stronger, then that's positive feedback. And we said that this is uncommon because we don't normally want to increase a change that makes something out of balance. But there's one example where this does happen, and that's childbirth. I want to increase the strength of contractions once I start having the contractions. So once contractions to uh, 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 birth the baby start, they increase because of positive feedback. Okay? If the feedback acts to decrease the change or to fix the change or bring it back to normal, that's called negative feedback. We're reversing the problem, and this is usually the case. And an example would be the release of insulin into the blood in response to increased glucose in the blood. So when I eat a meal, I get increased glucose in my blood, and I need to do something with that glucose. So insulin is released, and it causes glucose to move into the cells out of the blood, lowering the blood glucose back to normal, and at the same time accomplishing the process of getting that glucose into my cells. Okay, so that's a negative feedback, and that would be an example of that, and you need to be able to give me that example. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So let's practice our understanding of this concept a little. I've given you a diagram of the flow of a homeostatic control mechanism, and that's in your notes. You can go to the class notes and click on this and see that. If you go to that page and review the completed diagram, you can get a good idea of how the information flows. And I also have a little game that you can play. You've got a review app that will allow you to check this understanding. And we'll play this really quickly here in the next slide. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Oops. Where did it go? Okay, guess I took it out. Um, so anyway, the link to this is in your class notes in your Canvas pages, and you can do this. You can go to this link, but this is what will happen if you go to this link. You'll come up with the flow diagram for a homeostatic control mechanism. And I'm not going to ask you to memorize this or actually even be able to complete this on a test or anything. I just want you to have a good idea of how this works. And if I click on advance, I start out with my system in balance, right? And then a stimulus causes an imbalance. Okay, something happens and I have an abnormal level of something or something like that. And now my system is out of balance. So what happens? Imbalance is detected by the receptors. Well, here are the receptors, okay? So the imbalance is detected by the receptors, and then the information is sent to the control center, okay? And there's the control center, and then the control center sends an action to occur to the effectors, and the effectors cause a change, and this brings my system back into balance. So now my system's in balance again. But then another system causes it to be out of balance. I can reverse this if I want to. I can go backwards. I can start over. And don't click on back to anatomy and physiology orientation menu, because that will go to a different website and you don't need to go there. Okay, so anyway, this is that game. If you want to practice this just to enhance your knowledge of what a homeostatic control mechanism does, go to your class notes in Canvas and click on the link to that, and it'll take you there. Okay. So now let's go back to, oops, not that. Where was I? Okay, so here's where I was. So that's a homeostatic control mechanism. So the concept of a homeostatic control mechanism is hugely important in physiology, and we've now recreated it in a simplified diagram form that follows a logical pattern. And it wouldn't take that much for you to actually learn that just by going through it a few times. And learning to organize your thinking about a complex topic in a sequence of logical questions is immensely helpful in this course. Okay. Now that we know what homeostasis is and the basis for a homeostatic control mechanism, let's get back to the graphic organizer. What are the body functions that support this goal? Again, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to figure out what functions accomplish the goal. We interact with the environment, and that interaction has goals. What functions accomplish those goals? Okay. Let's see if we can think about them in some kind of an order here that will help us. So it should make sense that if we're going to maintain a stable internal environment, the first thing that we have to do is separate the inside of the body from the outside of the body. If I'm going to maintain a stable internal environment, I've got to separate that internal environment from the external environment. We also separate the inside of cells from outsides of cells. Okay, so the function that accomplishes this is called maintaining boundaries. Okay, that's a body function. Maintaining boundaries is the body function in which an external environment is separated from, or the internal environment is separated from the external environment. This is accomplished by an anatomic structure called a membrane. So in the cell, it's the cell membrane that accomplishes that. In the human body, it's the cutaneous membrane that accomplishes that. The cutaneous membrane is part of something that we call the skin or the integumentary system, as we'll see. Okay. So in my graphic organizer now, I've added maintaining boundaries as something that helps maintain a stable internal environment. Now, once we have our internal environment separated from the external environment, we have to set up our homeostatic control mechanisms. I've got the separation complete. Now, let's add in the control systems. Okay, so we have these systems. We call this function, or this ability to respond to changes, we call this function responsiveness. Okay, we call this responsiveness. Now, there's a part of being able to respond that's so big and so important that we actually separate it out as its own function. Although it's actually part of responsiveness, we're going to separate it out. We're going to call it movement. Okay, movement is part of responsiveness. I move to respond to something. I move to respond to something in the environment, for example. It's part of responsiveness, but it's big enough that we give it its own category. So movement away from things we don't want to associate with, or things toward things we do want to associate with this, and we call this major body function movement. Okay, so I put the wrong thing in 49. A large part of responsiveness is the ability to move away from, and we simply call this major body function movement. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. So there's responsiveness and movement. Put this in your graphic organizer. Now, it's all well and good to have these homeostatic mechanisms in place, but it would be very difficult to make them work if we didn't have a way to get materials that help maintain homeostasis throughout the body. So our next function is I have to be able to move biomaterials from place to place, or I have to be able to distribute them, okay, in order for them to be acted on or to act. And the major body function that accomplishes this is distribution of biomaterials, okay? And if I click on my map, there it is, distribution of biomaterials. Let's go to the next slide. Finally, we have to be able to get rid of or excrete things we don't want in our body. Excretion is a body function by which an organism removes toxic or unwanted materials from its body. Ignore the grammar mistake there. So if I click on that, I have excretion. So I have 5 functions that accomplish maintaining a stable internal environment. Everything I need to accomplish a stable internal environment fits into this goal. Okay, so now I can say I have one goal, I acquire energy and biomaterials, and the functions that accomplish that are digestion and metabolism. My second goal is to maintain a stable internal environment, and my goals that accomplish that are maintaining boundaries, responsiveness, movement, distribution of biomaterials, and excretion. Okay, so we're building an important list here. And then finally, my third function, to persist in the environment as an individual and as a species. To say that we want to persist in the environment as individuals just means we want to live. We want to continue to exist in the environment and interact with it indefinitely. We want to live, we want to be for as long as possible. So to say that we want to persist in the environment as a species means we want our species to carry on throughout generations, right? We don't want our species to die out or disappear. So, as individual organisms go through life, in order to persist, it must mature. Okay? And the major body function that accomplishes this is growth and development. Okay? It's not growth or development. They're not the same thing. Growth and development. Okay? Growth is defined as an increase of an organism due to increase in number of cells. Okay? That's all growth is. I'm increasing the number of cells. This is distinguished from development, which is not an increase in size, but an increase in functional capability. Okay, I don't just have cells that kind of sit there and don't do much. I change the cell to something that contracts, or I change the cell to something that protects, or I change the cell to something that carries oxygen. So we change or increase the functional capability of tissues due to maturation of cells making up that particular tissue. Okay, so I grow, I increase the number of cells, but not only do I increase the number of cells, I increase the ability of them to do different things. That's development. Okay, so it's growth and development. And then to persist in the environment over long periods of time as a species, an organism must be able to reproduce. So reproduction is the function that's associated with that. Okay? So if I click on my map, I see growth and development and reproduction. So put those in place. So now we know that we interact with the environment. There are 3 goals of this interaction, and each of these goals is associated with a set of body functions that help accomplish that goal. If I think of that goal, I should be able to immediately pull to mind the set of functions that accomplishes that. If I want to persist, I need to grow and develop, and I need to reproduce. If I want to acquire energy and biomaterials, I need digestion and metabolism. If I want to maintain a stable environment, I need maintaining boundaries, responsiveness, movement, distribution of biomaterials, and excretion. And now I've got to stop this video and go to the next one.